Hi, everybody. Welcome to the second Program Director webinar of 2021. We're happy that you are able to join us today. My name is Lauren, and I am the Stakeholder Program Manager here at the National Registry. And the purpose of these webinars is to make sure that you have, as educators and program directors, have the knowledge and tools, and we're keeping you up to date with the most accurate and relevant changes within the National Registry. And without your partnership, we're unable to ensure that the safety of the public. So thank you again for joining the webinar. So let's kick things off today. Several of my colleagues are going to be discussing the National Registry values. We're going to go over accommodations today. We're going to talk about the cognitive examination development, cognitive examination delivery, cognitive examination rescoring procedure. We're also going to talk about some psychomotor examination material security, along with some COVID-19 research project that we have going on. And then at the end, we will take questions and ask for feedback. Some few housekeeping things. Today's webinar will run about a maximum of 90 minutes. Again, at the end, we are going to welcome any questions or answer any questions you may have. But you can still submit those questions throughout the webinar. We'll just go over them at the end. And again, the webinar is recording. It'll be made available to you on our YouTube channel. You'll be receiving an email with the YouTube attachment to that. And again, we appreciate your partnership. So what does the National Registry do or don't do? So the National Registry doesn't define the national scope of practice. That is the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, in partnership with the National Association of EMS Physicians. They define that scope of practice. The registry doesn't develop any EMS education standards, though that is responsibility of, again, the NHTSA and the National Association of EMS Educators. SIMSO develops the National EMS Module Protocols, and COAMPS, also known as Committee on Accreditation for EMS Professions, they approve the paramedic education programs. KHAB approves continuing education, and then individual states reserve the right to authorize individuals to practice within each state. The Interstate Commission for EMS Personnel Practice, also known as Compact, they establish the rules for interstate practice. And agencies approve the credentials to work within their respective agency. So that comes to what the National Registry does. The National Registry administers the nation's EMS certification, and we are proud to do so. Our mission is we are the nation's EMS certification, and our mission is to provide a valid, uniform process to assess the knowledge and skills required for competent practice by EMS professionals. Again, not only do we take this with pride, we are proud and committed to our 6 core values. So we're accountability. We hold ourselves accountable for our actions, follow through with things that we have said or committed to, and we realize that we are responsible for the consequences of any of our actions. Collaboration. We're committed to collaborating with a sincere effort to look beyond ourselves and actively engage with others for the good of the whole. Inclusiveness. We strive to be inclusive and merge the knowledge of different disciplines, backgrounds, and specialties to better represent internal and external stakeholders. Innovation. We are innovative and willing to accept risk and potential failures to identify novel ideas and add value and relevancy while progressing through our mission. integrity. We have integrity and do what is right in every facet. Not necessarily what is convenient or popular, but we also hold ourselves accountable for those things. Transparency. We are transparent, open, and upfront with our decisions and the rationale behind them. We ensure we communicate with internal and external stakeholders and the impact those decisions may have on our community. And again, we hold our mission and our core values with pride. We follow them. And with that being said, I'm going to turn it over to Dawn Malone to talk about some ADA accommodations.
Thank you, Lauren. Hello, everyone. My name is Dawn Malone. I'm the Senior Examinations Content Administrator, and I'm here to give you a brief overview of accommodations at the National Registry. I have 3 takeaways for you today. First, the National Registry is compliant with the Americans with Disabilities Act, the ADA. We do allow for accommodations on our exams, and we've been doing this for almost 30 years, since the 1990s. So in accordance with the ADA, we grant accommodations that are reasonable and appropriate. They're meant to give disabled students an equitable testing experience, not an advantage over other students. The most common requests are time extension, a private testing room, and a person to read test questions to the candidate. Please note that accommodations available for candidates taking the online exams at home are limited. For instance, a reader is not allowed, nor can candidates read aloud to themselves when they take the exam online at home. Number 2, every completed application is reviewed on a case-by-case basis. The accommodations that are granted depend on the needs of the individual, their diagnosed disability, and their supporting documentation. Our website has a checklist that describes documentation we need, or you can always email us and ask. Please know that just because a student receives an accommodation in school, it doesn't mean they'll automatically be granted the same accommodation for the high-stakes National Registry exam. 3, candidates should apply as early as possible. It's usually a couple of weeks or less, but sometimes it can take up to 30 days to process a request, and sometimes longer if the candidate needs to get additional documentation, but we're happy to work with them. Another thing you can know, if a student is granted a private room or a reader, they may have to wait a few weeks for space at a Pearson VUE Test Center, especially now with the pandemic. Some centers are still not up to full capacity, and those that are have some pent-up demand. So please, again, ask your students to apply early. We're more than happy to work with them. And finally, if you or your students have any questions about accommodations, the best thing to do is email our team at accommodations@nrimt.org. I'm going to give you a hint. Be sure to spell the email address correctly, because if you don't, we won't get it. Also, there's no automated response. A live person will respond to your email within about 48 hours, 48 business hours. If you don't hear from us, we probably didn't get your email, so check the spelling and try it again, because we really want to help you out. That's what I have today. I look forward to your questions. Thank you very much. Now I'm going to hand the presentation over to John Corley.
Thank you, Dawn. Hi, my name is John Corley, and I'm an examinations program manager, and I work for the National Registry. So I work mainly on the cognitive exam, and I'm here to talk to you today about the examination development lifecycle. The examination development lifecycle keeps the examination current, valid, reliable, and accurate, and it's designed to produce several things. The first thing it creates is a practice analysis, and what that is a list of the tasks, knowledge, skills, and abilities a person is required to have to practice safely as an EMS provider. The second thing it's going to generate is a valid linking between EMS practice and examinations content, and this is done via the development of a test blueprint from the practice analysis, which produces the content domains. The life cycle generates test questions to evaluate a candidate's competency, and these are written and developed by subject matter experts that are external to the National Registry. They're validated with external subject matter expert review panels and content referencing, and ensures that the content is within the parameters of the test specifications and test blueprint. This process also includes real-world observation of test questions and candidate responses, known as piloting, and analysis of those items in the item performance, called item analysis, development of a minimum passing score or standard setting process, and it also includes a continuous quality assurance and control process, which is an ongoing evaluation, review, and update process of all phases of the examination development lifecycle. That includes a review of examination content, any processes or procedures that we utilize as we continue to work to meet the needs of the EMS community. Before we get started, though, talking about the examination development lifecycle, I want to remind everybody that the foundation of our examination starts with the EMS community. It starts with you, the subject matter expert, the educator, the practitioner, the person who's out in the field with direct patient contact. Without your input and your expertise, we could not successfully create a valid examination. So please, if you want to get involved with the process, I would encourage you to go to volunteer.nremt.org and sign up. We have plenty of opportunities. We're constantly doing item review panels. We need you in the ongoing evaluation process and standard setting and in the practice analysis piece. So if you have an opportunity to get involved, we really would appreciate it, and we rely on your expertise. So the practice analysis. What is the purpose of the practice analysis? And it's kind of in the name, right? It's to analyze practice. What are they doing out there? What are paramedics, EMTs, AEMTs, EMRs? What are they doing? The practice analysis generates that list of tasks that providers are using to provide safe clinical care. And it includes information about what you need to do those tasks, including what knowledge, what skills, and what abilities you have to have in order to successfully and safely complete that task while performing patient care. The practice analysis, again, captures current EMS care. It was generated, the most recent one, by a data-driven research project that analyzes NEMSIS data. It involved over 10,000 agencies and 30 million EMS runs. Over 3,500 subject matter experts had individual input into the practice analysis, and it drives the creation of the test specifications. As you can see, this is a highly complex process, and it's foundational to content validity. So what are the test specifications? It's two things. It's test description. It describes the examination in terms of length, item types used, and the audience, etc. But mainly for content, it's the test blueprint, and that's built from the practice analysis. And the test blueprint is created by evaluating practice analysis and analyzing the information within that to create the domain structure. The test blueprint provides us a guide for item generation and test form assembly. And test form assembly is just a fancy name for deciding what content needs to go in a test, right? And practice analysis and test specifications are the direct link from EMS practice to our examination content. So as you're seeing, we're involving lots of data, lots of subject matter expert opinions and input, and we're linking that through an analysis in the blueprint. And then we're directly linking all of that data into each individual test question on the examination and creating a direct link from practice to the examination content. So as an aside, as we're kind of talking about content and where it kind of comes from, what I want to mention here at this point is what the National Registry doesn't do. And what we don't do is define clinical standards. Where do the clinical standards come from? Well, they come from you guys, the EMS community. NHTSA, of course, as you know, sets the standards for scope. Guidelines comes from our medical community in terms of the ACS, COT, AHA, CDC. You know, what the registry does not do is set the standard. We facilitate a test development process that is inclusive of the EMS community and relies on these standards generated by external subject matter experts and organizations to create a valid, reliable, and defensible examination that is linked directly to practice. So where do we get the test questions? They come from an expert, subject matter expert panel that's external, and they write the test questions. The item generation, again, is based on that test blueprint, which, again, I really want to emphasize comes from that practice analysis. And that practice analysis, again, is linking content to practice. And so each and every test question that is developed and written by a subject matter expert external to the organization can be tracked and directly linked to a knowledge, capability, or task that is performed in the field that we've uncovered through this whole test development or exam development lifecycle. Panels are reflective of the certification body, right? We need to make sure that the panels have a diverse representation, including demographic representation, geographic representation, right? We want to make sure that we have a diverse population in terms of where they're coming from in the United States, and environmental practice. We want to make sure that we're having rural, providers, urban providers, individuals from different environments of care, including fire, practice, municipal services, so on and so forth. And then once an item is generated, then it's going to move on to review. So the review process is designed to accomplish a number of different things. We want to make sure that the keyed responses are correct. We want to make sure that the distractors are incorrect. And I want to put a point of emphasis here. There are no best of distractors on the National Registry examination. Every distractor is wrong. There are no partially correct responses. Every distractor is outright incorrect, and all of the correct answers are correct. We want to make sure that the content is relevant, is accurate, and that it's current. You know, I know back in 1900, we used to see those big billows with CPR and stuff like that. We don't test on that because it's not relevant, it's not current, it's not part of EMS practice today. And we know that because we performed that practice analysis. I'm going to be talking about that a lot. Internal subject matter review. Once it goes through that process of item generation, we're going to take a look at it internally. We're going to look at it for those things that we talked about, clinical accuracy, and making sure that those keys are just correct, that the distractors are incorrect. And we want to make sure that we're referencing to EMS sources such as textbooks and guidelines, ACS-COT and AHA, and that it complies with best item development practices. We want to make sure that the items don't have any slang, that the stems are clean, they're concise, the options are in a logical order if it calls for that, right? So what that means is if I have a number of options that are ordered in a number like 1, 2, 3, 4, right? I'm not going to mix up that order and be like 3, 2, 1, 4, whatever order. I'm going to make sure it's logical, it makes sense. The reason we do these things is, one, because we want the content to be right, but two, we want to make sure that the item is giving the candidate the best opportunity possible for them to get the item correct. We want to make sure that candidates who understand and know the content get this item right. And so a lot of the work that is done in item development is to prevent a candidate who knows the information from incorrectly responding. So that's the goal of item development, or a lot of it, is to make sure that candidates who know the information are getting the item correct. And we put a lot of work into that. So I know that a lot of individuals think that, and we'll talk about this later in kind of the myths of the examination, that the National Registry is here to see people fail, but that's not what we want. We want people who know the information to get it right so they can go on and practice and provide care in their communities. So after that process is done, then we have an editor take a look at this, and the editor is going to review for grammar, style, and readability. And I'm a paramedic, and so you guys know that that means I'm not really great with punctuation and grammar and stuff like that. So that's why we have Dean. And I like to call Dean our lean, mean grammar machine. And he's out there and he's working hard to make sure that everything has one voice, one style, and we have all the punctuation and commas and everything else in there. And again, the purpose of that is, one, is so it's professionally developed, but also it's so candidates who know the answer can get it right. And they're not trying to figure out what this item means. We also want to make sure that the examination has one voice. Thousands and thousands of people are involved with examination development over the years, right? Because we have people from all walks of life constantly generating items, and we want to make sure that that item sounds like it's got one voice across the board. So examinations look like it was developed by one person, even though thousands of people are involved. So Dean's got a hard job, basically, is what I'm trying to say. So the item review panel then will come in after all of that stuff is done, right? And by the way, we haven't even gotten to piloting yet. A candidate hasn't even seen an item, and all of this work has already been done. And it's not even on an examination yet. So now we're in the item review process, and an external subject matter panel is going to come in. Same kind of process before in terms of selecting the subject matter expert. We're going to look for the panel that's reflective of the certification body. We're going to make sure they have a diverse representation in terms of demographic, geographic, and environment of practice. But we also want to make sure that these aren't the same people who wrote the test question. Now, I don't know about you guys, but for me, when I write something in terms of like an email or a report or something like that, and I send that off to my professor to take a look at in grading, and then they send it back all marked up, and I get like, oh, I really like that. That was something I was really proud of, and I have a lot of emotional attachment to those words. That's why we don't do that, right? We want to make sure that we have an objective look or view at that item where somebody's not emotionally attached to it and can tear it all up and not feel bad about it. And so that's why we separate the item generation piece from the review piece, and we have different people involved. So it's a fresh, unbiased look. And then finally, at this point, once it goes through all those processes, then again, Dean, our grammar machine, is going to come in and he's going to make us see, you know, what what changes were made in that panel, because the panel is going to edit, review, revise, and he's going to make sure that any grammar mistakes or anything like that that may be introduced inadvertently get fixed up before they go into the piloting process. So after items go through that detailed review and editing process, done by SMEs, facilitated by the National Registry, they are piloted on our examinations a minimum of 400 times. Now, if I do something 400 times in my personal life, by the end of that 400th time, I'm going to know pretty well if I'm good at it or not. So I can tell you right now, I'm not very good at carpentry or installing tile as a homeowner. So we know that that's somebody I'm going to have to, we can go back, read it, and revise that process. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to hire an outside contractor to do that because I'm not good at that. So the same kind of concept applies. If I send an item through this and expose it to 400 candidates, 400 different responses from 400 different people from different programs, different regions, different demographics, we're going to have a really good body of knowledge about what this item is capable of. And we're going to use that information to determine if it meets our standards, right? And then at that point, if it meets our standards, then it's going to go onto the examination as a scored item. Finally, after all this happens. But what if it doesn't? What if it doesn't meet our standards and we find out, like with me and my carpentry skills, it's just not up to par? We're going to remove that item from the examination form. It's going to go and get reevaluated. Then it's potentially going to get modified, and then we're going to repilot it. Or it may turn out, hey, this item was really, really bad, just like me at carpentry, and we just have to kind of get rid of it, which is an unfortunate thing. Because you see all of the work that was put into this process up to that point, and it was all kind of for naught. But we'd rather have an item get discarded at this point and never, ever, ever become a scored item on the exam than have a problem with it. So everything up until this point is designed to make sure that the items are, remember, tied to practice, that they're accurate, they're relevant to practice, their keys are correct, the distractors are incorrect, and it's functioning appropriately. So that's how an item is generated and then placed on the examination to be a scored item. How do we determine if a candidate is above or below a passing standard? Well, the National Registry really doesn't. We do involve subject matter experts here at this point. And so what we do is a process called standard setting, and it's a process to distinguish between what a competent candidate looks like and a candidate who doesn't have competency. What do they look like? This is a process by which the passing standard basically is determined. It's a complex intersection of data-driven and quantitative analysis with subject matter input designed to be in compliance with the industry standard and to be a fair and defensible process of determining a passing standard, right? Fair and defensible. Like I talked about before, we want to make sure that candidates who know the information and who are competent are above that passing standard and they are sort of successful on the exam. Right, all passing standard activities are overseen and approved by the board of directors. There's a lot of insight and transparency in terms of that with our board of directors, and this is a very complex process that integrates a ton of different moving pieces. And that's how we set the standard. It's just this huge data-driven process with subject matter input and board oversight. And then after standard setting takes place, once all of that work has been done, we need to make sure that our work continues to be good, right? Sometimes changes in EMS practice drift, and we need to make sure that our test is adapting to those changes, right? So an ongoing evaluation of our exams is another instance where we seek industry input and expertise. This is a part of the process where we get subject matter experts involved. So one of those things that we look for in this continuous process is updates to content, feedback from the EMS community, changes in literature, or just an item drifts for whatever reason. So we have parameters where items can perform, and if we start to see changes in how an item's performing, we pull it from the exam. We want to know why that drift is occurring. We want to make any edits or changes to that item if it's not performing to our standards. So an item doesn't just go into an examination and then just live there untouched and unreviewed. We're constantly reevaluating these test questions to make sure that they're up to our standards and that they're serving the EMS community. So with that being said, that is the examination development lifecycle at the National Registry in a nutshell. From there, what we'll do is we'll move on to some of the changes that are coming down the pipeline for the examination. And that's going to include content updates and kind of how we do those and technology enhanced items. And again, this is all part of our quality and improvement processes and key components of what we do every single day. So on the next slide, what we'll do is we'll take a look at the content updates. And what happens when the American Heart Association or NHTSA or CDC or whomever updates a guideline or a change. Just in 2020, for instance, we had the AHA update that modified some things, and a lot of questions came out about how fast does that happen? How long does it take for you guys to take that content off of the examination? And truly, it's really quick. It's just days from the announcement. We remove that content. Now, when does new content go in the examination? As you see, anytime we add new content to the examination, it's a lengthy process and it involves a lot of moving pieces. So it can take a little bit, but in terms of content that is incongruent with the guideline updates, that's removed basically immediately. Items that need to be updated are then kind of go through that review process that we talked about before with item development. They're modified, we re-reference them to the new guidelines, and then they go through the panels again, and they go through that whole item development process again. They're repiloted and then republished. And if an item doesn't meet the standards after that whole process, then of course we either modify it or remove it from the bank, just as we did before. So on the next slide, we'll talk about technology enhanced items. So what is a technology enhanced item? It's a computer delivered test question that is designed to more closely simulate a clinical experience. And why do we want to use a technology enhanced item? We want to have a better measurement ability, always looking to improve that piece. It's a more accurate candidate evaluation, and it's more authentic for the candidate and their experience. For the candidates find that technology enhanced items are more reflective of what they're used to experiencing in the field and in practice. And so that's kind of why we're sort of kind of looking at these items in a way that's like, yeah, maybe we should be getting into that. So here's an example of a technology enhanced item. This is live on our exams currently right now. These are multiple response items. Again, a multiple response item is very similar to your classic multiple choice item in that you have a stem at the top there, which is basically asking a question, and then the candidate is going to have to select a number of responses from the bottom. And then your classic multiple choice item, selected response item, you're going to be able to choose one. In a multiple response item, you're going to choose many, and the candidates are always going to know what number of items that they're going to have to select. So, and you see in our example here, where it says which of the following signs or symptoms are associated with asthma, select the 3 answer options that are correct. They're going to know that they're going to need to select 3 answer options, right? And all of our multiple response items are going to have that. It's either going to be 2 or 3, and they'll have to choose from a set number of options. It improves the candidate's performance on multiple response items, actually, to have that that piece when they know. It improves our ability to measure, and it's the best testing practice to be able to select to have that out there. So, and that's the multiple response item and kind of what they look like. Some of the other TEI items that are coming up are multiple graphic images, and it's going to be like a multiple response item that we just took a look at. Except it'll be graphics, and they'll select the multiple graphics. They may encounter an item that has a highlight where they have to highlight relevant information in the question, matching, which is pretty standard in terms of they're matching different terms that have some kind of association to them. They may have to order a response like an assessment or something like that. I really want to emphasize here, there is no time frame on deployment of these new TEI items, and that we're going to be extremely transparent when it comes to when these will be placed on an examination and timelines and everything else, and all kinds of communication when it comes to this piece. No one will be surprised when a multiple graphic image shows up on an examination. We will have made sure to communicate with you extremely well, frequently, and in detail about all of these changes before they happen, well in advance. So some of the myths I've already kind of hit on a little bit throughout our conversation about the examination development lifecycle. One of the myths, of course, is registry wants people to fail. I'm an educator. I have an education background. I taught in a paramedic program as program director at a fire department. No bigger high for me than seeing a candidate through all the way to the completion where they achieve the success with the National Registry. They get licensed and they're out there providing patient care. I don't want people to fail. I want them to be successful. The registry doesn't want people to fail. What we do want is people who have the competency to safely practice, to achieve success on our examinations, and individuals who are unsafe to practice to go back and gain that competency and then come back and then maybe be successful later on down the line. But we absolutely don't want people to fail. Registry writes the test questions, and they're out of touch with reality. We don't write the test questions. The subject matter experts will do that, right? So we make sure that we're really involving the community. We really want that this whole process to be reflective of the EMS community and its guidelines, and we really are servants to the EMS community in terms of content and making sure that our examinations is reflective of practice. And that kind of goes back to our volunteerism, and let me just kind of push that again. Please sign up for that, because that's really critical to us being able to develop this exam. Registry sets industry standards. We don't remember NHTSA, the National Highway Traffic and Safety Administration. They set the scope of practice standards and things like that. Practice analysis, remember, is not something that we create in terms of a standard, but it essentially is a data collection of what is happening that we are able to use to link our content to practice. But that's not a standard that we're creating. That's coming from outside sources. Items that aren't within scope of practice or in my examination, we do a really good job of making sure that does not happen through all these different checks and balances. We're doing a really good job in referencing these NHTSA documents to make sure that we're keeping all of these items in scope. Remember, we're referencing test questions with guidelines and textbooks to make sure that they're in scope for each thing. Now, what sometimes will happen is that a candidate will go in and encounter an item that they perceive to be out of scope. Like, for instance, an EMT has the capability to acquire and transmit the quality ECG, but they don't have the ability to interpret that. That would fall outside of their scope of practice. So, if they encountered a question that involved the acquisition of an ECG and transmission, that would certainly be confounding to a candidate who maybe doesn't have competency in that particular area. So that's just an example of that. Another example of a myth that we often frequently hear questions about is, hey, do we do max length examinations randomly? The answer to that is no, there are no random max length exams. Examinations run just as long as they need to on the CAT exams. And then once they don't need to run anymore, they stop. It actually would not be beneficial for us to have a max length examination. So with all that being said, thank you guys for your time, and thank you for listening, and thank you for going to that volunteer page and signing up and helping us out. I'm just proactively going to thank you for that, because I know you guys are all going to do that right now. I really appreciate your time and listening to me talk today. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn the presentation over back to Lauren.
So now that we've talked about exam development, let's talk about examination delivery. So there are two types of examinations. You have the adaptive exam, which is also known as a CAT exam, and then you have the linear exam. So the adaptive exam is the commonly used in high-stake exams. They are tailored to the candidate's ability, and they're variable length examinations. The linear exam is a fixed length exam, and it's commonly known, as the computer version of the paper pencil exam, and it's a fixed length exam. So as we all know, with COVID-19 and the pandemic, everyone was, trying to adapt and overcome to the different changes, and with technology and everything like that. Well, the National Registry, we strive to find another method of examination delivery. So we developed the remote proctoring exam delivery, which allows candidates to take the exam from the comfort of their home or another appropriate space, as long as they have reliable internet, a webcam, and their computer can run the remote proctoring extension. So remote proctoring exams are delivered through Pearson VUE through a product called OnView. We are currently only doing remote proctored exams for the EMT and AMT levels. And while we're just a year, over a year into the remote proctoring exam delivery, we have testimonies from multiple different individuals. We have it from state officials, candidates, program directors, educators, training officers, that are reporting positive experience about their OnView experience. which include anything from reducing test anxiety, the convenience and how it's so flexible to individual schedules. The on-view examinations are still slated to remain in use at this time at the EMT and AMT levels. And the board is actively considering remote proctoring for other exam levels, but right now there's no plans to add the additional levels at this time. So let's talk about each individual level and what it has to offer. So the EMR is an adaptive exam. Candidates are going to see anywhere from 90 to 110 questions. They are allotted an hour and 45 minutes for their examination, and it costs about $85. So the EMT, as I just mentioned, there's two types of examination. If the candidate is going to the Pearson VUE Testing Center, the examination is going to be adaptive, and they're going to see anywhere from any items from the range of 70 to 120 questions. They're going to have 2 hours to take that examination, and as it is for they're both the same on view and reporting to a Pearson VUE testing site, it costs $90. If the candidate at the EMT level is taking the remote proctored exam, it's a linear form. They're going to see 110 questions, and they still have that 2-hour time frame. And again, like EMT, there's two options available to candidates. They can go to Pearson VUE, which that exam and the remote proctored exam for the AMT level is both linear. They're going to see 135 questions on both examinations, and they have 2 hours and 15 minutes to take that examination. And it costs $136. So last but not least, we're going to talk about the paramedic. It's adaptive exam, and this is not available through the on-view remote proctoring option. It's adaptive. They can see anywhere from 80 to 150 questions. They'll have 2 hours and 30 minutes to take the examination, and it costs $125. So in this slide, it's a comparative slide which shows our examination cost against some other healthcare professions costs. Our examinations, as you can see, are the most affordable in the healthcare industry. Those costs are partially what ensures a valid examination. Valid examinations are a balance of content, which must be appropriate and continually updated to reflect best practices, psychometrics, which statistically ensures that the exam is performing as intended, exam security, which protects the integrity of our examination, and remember, valid exams protect the public. It's necessary for all of these things to ensure that we have a valid exam. So at this time, I'm going to turn things over to Mihai Aguju to talk about the cognitive examination rescoring procedure.
Thank you, Lauren. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mihai Aguju, and I serve as the psychometrics manager at the National Registry of EMTs. Today, I would like to give an overview of the updates we made to one of our processes, namely the cognitive examination rescoring process. As part of our operational work, we routinely review and update as necessary our policies and procedures. And this is done to better address the needs of our stakeholders, to ensure that we are up to date with changes in the standards, such as the standards for educational and psychological testing or the National Commission for Certifying Agencies, as well as to make our internal processes more efficient. So before I give you the updates that we made to delve more into that, I want to provide just a few words about the cognitive examination scoring. As Lauren mentioned, all National Registry cognitive examinations are computer-based and are administered either as fixed-length forms or as computerized adaptive tests, which are variable length. For all these examinations, the scoring is done automatically. What this means is that a computer algorithm is programmed to determine, as a candidate answers each item on the test, whether they answered that item correctly or not by comparing the candidate's response choice with the correct answer for that particular item. The computer algorithms for each examination are verified prior to publishing each new test by running some pilot tests using simulated data and checking the results of those pilot tests to ensure they are running correctly and producing accurate results. As the cognitive examination scoring is highly accurate and the probability of the computer algorithm erroneously determining a candidate's score is extremely improbable. However, we understand that sometimes candidates feel as if they had a different or a better performance on their examination than what their test results reflect. So as a service to the community, the National Registry offers candidates the option to have their examination rescored by a qualified staff member. So now I would like to tell you why we did the updates and what we put in those updates. So the main reason for the updates was to make it easier for candidates who are interested in submitting a rescoring request to actually do that. And we did this by creating a web-based standardized application scoring form, which replaced the free form candidates had to write and mail to the National Registry. We also set up an online payment option, which allows candidates to make a credit card payment within 24 hours of submitting the rescoring request form, instead of having to mail a check to the National Registry. The online payment has the advantage of expediting the rescoring process, which is in the interest of the candidates as well. We also updated the language of the rescoring process that is available on our website, and we did this based on feedback received from candidates in the past, as well as following our own internal review process. And this was done to make sure that we clarify any language that was creating confusion for candidates, and as well as to specifically identify what the review process will include and what it will not include. And this was done to ensure that candidates have a clear understanding and clear expectations, related to the rescoring process. Further, we also included a sample of the rescoring report that the candidate would receive upon the completion of the rescoring process, so as to assist them in making an informed decision prior to submitting the rescoring request form. The candidates now have the opportunity to review the rescoring report and to determine whether the information they will receive upon the completion of the rescoring process is what they are looking for. It will answer their questions and be able to make a better decision. And finally, we made a decision to update this process to make it more efficient for our own internal purposes.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jonathan Powell, and I'm a research fellow at the NREMT. I'm both a paramedic and a former program director, and I'm happy to have the opportunity to speak with you all about some of the exciting research that's occurring in our field. Last summer, EMS stakeholder organizations organized a task force to help our community understand the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on initial EMS education. These organizations included CAPC, COAMPS, the IAFC, the IAFF, NAMSI, NASIMSO, NHTSA, and us here in the NREMT. We used a modified Delphi approach to determine research priorities between the participating organizations. The top 4 priorities to study were pre-hospital internship access, impact of lack of field and clinical experience, student health and safety, and EMS program availability and accessibility. Next slide, please. We will begin investigating these priorities with a series of EMT and paramedic program-related focus groups, looking to the source population of program directors to inform us to what actually happened during the pandemic response in EMS education. This study is IRB approved by the American Institutes for Research, and de-identified aggregated data will be submitted for publication. We sent out recruitment emails to all program directors on June 1st. If you have not seen this email, please check your spam filters as it would have come from our survey software, Alchemer. Thank you all for your time, and please consider participating. I believe Lauren, take it from here.
So now we're going to take a few moments to answer any questions anyone may have.
So Lauren, one of the questions that I'm reading here, it's actually from Michael Caduce. Hi, Michael. Is that we may have been unclear in that we do have examinations that we deliver in both linear and CAT format. And John, you might be best equipped to answer that question and clarify the respective modalities that we deliver our exams.
Yes, so Michael, I see, yeah, so we do have linear and adaptive examinations. Adaptive examinations currently are only being performed at Pearson VUE sites in person, and right now our linear examinations are being done via remote proctoring or online proctoring. So that's if you're taking the examination at home on your computer in a secure testing environment there. So those are linear exams. So the EMT examination currently right now is being administered in an adaptive format on site at a Pearson VUE Center, and if you're taking it at home, it is a linear exam.
All right, so another question we have, is there any way for program directors to receive notifications when students make any cognitive attempt? You can check the candidate's progress via the report on the program director role, but currently at this time, we don't have a way to notify program directors of when candidates take the examination. I believe that is all the questions we have. Not Alan, not unless you are seeing more.
I think we've addressed every question in the chat, but we will certainly stick around for another minute or two just to make sure that we've provided all the clarity that we can. So if there are any other questions anyone wants to provide, we'd be happy to answer them. Oh, here's a question. It came in from Ray. Remote examinations and what the impact on exam delivery might be with disruptions to a remotely proctored exam. John, you might be best equipped to answer that.
Yeah, so if there's a disruption to a remote examination, obviously Pearson VUE is going to attempt to work with the candidate to ensure that disruption has minimal impact on the candidate within reason. But if there's an interruption with connection or things like that, the examination attempt may in fact end, and that's why Pearson VUE and the National Registry want to make sure that candidates who are utilizing the remote option make sure that they have a secure internet connection and that they're doing a check on all of their equipment inside of the parameters before they go live with the examination attempts. So, you know, we encourage the candidates who are taking the remote examination to go ahead and do a dry run essentially before that. And Pearson VUE has a mechanism to do that and to make sure that they have the internet connection that's very strong. And if possible, not on Wi-Fi, but using Ethernet connection that's directly hooked up to their modem, because with a sustained disconnection could, in fact, end their examination attempt.
I see a question down here, and there's a question from Alex Stadhagen. I hope I pronounced that correctly, regarding accommodations and whether or not there are accommodations for psychomotor skills. Dawn, I think that one is for you.
Sure. If you have a candidate who requires accommodations for psychomotor skills, actually ask them to go through the same process as for the cognitive exam. So complete the accommodations questionnaire, which is the application, indicate the disability, and then send us the documentation for the disability. We'll review it and we will give a response. So there are accommodations for skills, but again, go through the same process.
If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to email us at stakeholderteam@nrent.org. And we'll be happy to answer any questions that you may have after this webinar. Other than that, I hope everyone has a great weekend.